Hello there, welcome to Genesis Models. My name is Paul Waldron and welcome to a new product review. The product review we're going to be looking at is the new AK Interactives 3rd generation paints. As you can see here, got a nice little t-shirt, and we're going to just put it through the test and see what they are all about. I've got a few example pieces just to show because they do a little bit more than the average modeling, scale modeling airbrush paint. So first off, let's take a look. Now they do have this kind of nice sort of bottles that they used to be in, a little bit differently, slightly designed differently. The real main feature is the lid that we see here. Seems like it's got this sort of cross thing going on here, which does actually just make it easier to open and close them. But the cool thing is, let's give it a little bit of a shake, is what we can do if we open this up. You've got this little cool feature where they've got this little tiny sort of circle on here as we can actually pour some paint in there, and we can actually see the colors that we are dealing with, right? Because it's one thing for them to say on the label what color it is, and you can kind of sort of see it that this is black, but to actually have the paint dry and actually see what you're looking at, I mean, I've got some examples here, as you can see them on there. It does kind of make things a little bit sort of cool, and depending on how you store them. I mean, I store them on the shelves just on the back here, so it's good to kind of see the name there, but sometimes people have them in their drawers, and when they pull them out, you can't really see the tops, but you know, we've got it both top and side, which does make it good for storage. Also on the labels, we do have all sorts going on here. It isn't just a case of here's a paint range. They do sort of categorize them in different ways. As you can see, we've got different sort of labels, different colors, and it just kind of just gives us a nicer way of sort of easily identifying from, you know, going with acrylic colors to intense colors to inks. I think they've got all sorts of things like pastels and stuff. Really nice way of sort of dividing them up, which is rather cool. A nice way of going about it. But what we're going to do now is we're just going to see how well they spray and everything. So first off, let's take our little example model here and we'll just spray some underneath here. So I'm just going to get out a nice grey, which we've got a medium grey just here, and we're just going to give it a good shake, and we're going to put it in the color cup. Now these are thick paints, which generally a lot of manufacturers out there kind of have their paints quite thin, so they go in the airbrush a bit easier. But in all honesty, you know, you could spray anything through an airbrush as long as you thin it right. It doesn't matter. So as much as they might seem a bit thick and you might not be thinking that that's going to be a good thing, it's actually a good thing, because you'll see later on why it's good that they are thicker. But we're just going to pour in a nice bit of AK thinners in here. Going to thin it around about 60-40. That's 60% thinners to paint. I've found seems to be a good one, because they are a bit thicker. They do need a bit more thinners. You might be able to see, you know, how thick that's going in there. Really need to sort of make sure we mix it up, right, which is no big deal because we should be doing that anyway, but you know, just make sure you give them a bit more of a mix than normal and a little bit more thinners, as I say. And what we're going to do is just spray this down and see how well we spray. So let's just take our wing just here and let's get our first bit of spray going down. So I'm just going to start off with a nice light misty coat. Right, as always, you don't want to be sort of putting it down so as, you know, the paint's really starting to get good coverage straight away. The first coat, nice light and misty, it just helps the paint stick to the model that little bit better. And because it's a nice misty coat, we can dry it quite quickly. So I'm just cutting to air just to dry this off, and that's dried already, so you know, drying pretty quick. So now what we can do is just put a nice light coat on, not a misty coat but a light coat, where we actually start to get some coverage down. You know, if you see it getting wet, just move along. Don't sort of keep your airbrush in the same place when you start seeing it get wet. Just move along. You don't want it pooling up or anything like that. And you could cut to air to dry it off, which, just to see what the drying time is with a light coat, I mean, this is almost dry already, right? So you do that for about maybe 2 or 3 coats and we should have some good coverage. So after doing a nice couple of coats, we end up with what does feel like a really sort of nice smooth surface, right? I'm just feeling this now, and hopefully, you know, you probably can't see on camera, hopefully we can sort of show you, but it does feel really sort of nice and smooth. It's not sort of all sort of matty kind of gritty or anything like that. Nice smooth sort of professional surface, which is what you're after. And after about, you know, 3 coats, it's really got some nice coverage to it as well. But I do highly recommend you don't blast this stuff down, because it can sort of really pool up and everything. But that goes for any sort of paints that you blast down too much. Nice thin coats and you should get a nice smooth surface. So let's just have a look. I mean, this hasn't had much time to dry, but let's see how durable the paints are. So I'm just going to try and scratch this with my nail, which, digging into it, yeah, we do get a bit of a scratch. So maybe not the most durable, but when it comes to it, really it's the masking tape that I really look out for when it comes to paints, because really when it comes to like scratching it or anything like that, you know, we're always going to be piling on the gloss coats and all that kind of stuff, and it's going to seal that in and stop any sort of scratches no matter what kind of paint it is. But we want to make sure we can actually mask this up. That is like the real question when it comes to this. So let's just put on a nice piece of masking tape. Let's actually sort of press it down to really sort of get it right down. Right, and then we want to just really sort of go for it, and there we go. Nice big tear there, and nothing has come off onto the masking tape, which is what you're after. You don't want it to peel up. So the masking tape is the big one, and it's nicely past that. Maybe not the most durable, but still it goes down really sort of smooth, nice and professional. So we want to sort of move along, and let's do some sort of practical spraying. Let's get in close. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to get out the black. We're going to do some pre-shading with our AK black, the 11029, and we're going to spray down some pre-shading. So just testing, see how we're sort of flowing here, and I'm going to start doing some pre-shading to sort of see how that turns out. So coming in with some pre-shading, we're just going to nicely come in close, see how this is. I'm just trying to get me biting point here, and we're just spraying some nice lines. So not too bad when doing some pre-shading and getting in close to the airbrush. It's pretty sort of average, shall I say, when it comes to, you know, compared to all the other manufacturers out there. Does the job quite well. Now what we're going to do now is, you know, spray on another coat, and we're just going to sort of thin the paints down as we go along, doing some pre-shading to, you know, sort of see how well it thins when it gets really sort of thin. So what we're going to do is just come along, and we're going to do our usual light coats, right, to sort of start to build that up and build it up, and just so as we have that black pre-shading just come through, so we get something a bit more interesting than the color we're using, which is we're using sky gray for this as well. So we're now going to thin this down for our normal sort of pre-shading, because, you know, we have nicely sort of started to get some coats down. We're seeing that pre-shading just come through, but we want to make sure we don't kill it off. So I'm just thinning this down so the paint's almost like a 80% thinners to paint, right? And we just want to see how it sort of goes and how well it does when it's like really sort of thinned down, and hopefully it doesn't create squares. I don't know if you've ever had that, but it can kind of like thin out and sort of pull up into corners and stuff if it's not flowing that well. So let's just spray this on now, nice and light, to get that final coat on, but so as we just get what we want and not kill off our pre-shading. So far it's thinning nice and feathered, really sort of nice and thin. Hopefully, as you can see there, we are sort of bringing that out. Now we just want to sort of let that dry, you know, and see it come through, and then maybe just target any spots that need it. But so far looking rather good. So there's the pre-shading, nicely done. Hopefully what you can see there is the black's just coming through and we get some pre-shading. Now I know I've kind of really sort of skipped over all the pre-shading. This isn't a teaching video, this is a product review, and we're just seeing what the paints can do. But in real world applications, hopefully as you can see there, we're getting those kind of results that we want from scale modeling. And even after getting in close and everything, I'm still feeling a really nice smooth surface, actually quite an impressive smooth surface. I mean, that's probably one of the big points I would say about these paints, is it really goes down nice and smooth, right? That's the big one. What I've also done is, just a little bit off camera, I've done a bit of modulation just here with a little Team Yankee M113, just to kind of show it off a little bit. Again, these paints have gone down pretty much exactly the same. It's just showing that we can get in close, we can do this kind of nice work. We do get like a nice smooth finish, we get a nice spray pattern, they thin down quite well. But really the sort of one of the things that I'm liking about these paints, which we're going to talk about, is because they're thick, it does make them good for figure painting. So we just got ourselves a little figure here, and we're going to do some figure painting tests, getting out a paintbrush. Now I know this is quite different because a lot of the manufacturers out there, their paints are kind of thin, designed to go through the airbrush, whereas these new third generation paints, they do spray as we've seen, but we can actually paint with them. So let's check and see how well they paint. So I'm just going to get out a bit of flesh here. We've got ourselves a little miniature to play around with. All right, give it a good shake. We can pour this out into you know, anything you like, just to kind of put it down on. Right, as always, when it comes to any kind of brush painting, you want to sort of thin your paints because you want to make sure that you don't get brush strokes. So just a little bit of water. Water seems to work quite well. And we're just going to thin that down, and we're just going to start painting a bit of flesh on this. Nothing too fancy. We just want to see how well it paints down. And already I'm just painting this on. Hopefully you can see we've got good coverage already with the first coat. It's going down rather nicely. It's kind of nice and smooth, not really any brush strokes, right? Just nice and easy. Probably 2 coats, right? And that'll probably be all nicely painted in. So hopefully I'm seeing that looking quite nice. So there's our nice little miniature there, nicely sort of quickly painted up, a nice quick sort of just to show you. And I did find that it just brushed on really sort of nicely, with a nice little bit of thinning. We've had no brush strokes, 2 coats only as well to get good coverage, as you can see just there. So really sort of painting nice, and just the feel of it and everything is like a nice good range for actual brush painting. So then it comes to, you know, what's in the range. Well, the range has a massive whopping 230 different paint colors. So we've got a really broad range of paint colors. Looking at them, you could go to the, well, one of the cool things is if you go to their website and you look at the colors, it will actually show you a little conversion chart for each and every single paint. So it will be going off saying things like this color is the equivalent of Tamiya's XF whatever, or Vallejo's whatever, which really does sort of help you sort of decide what paints to buy, because I know there's a lot of people out there who like to make sure they get a nice good color match for whatever model they're doing, and by being able to know that, you know, this is an equivalent color to Tamiya's this, or Vallejo's this, or whatever paint range, it just helps you sort of identify what's going to be the best color for the job, which is a nice little feature that they have added. But looking at the range, it does look like they cover a lot of different colors, both for scale modeling in the sense of aircraft and armor. As you've already seen, I've already done 2 examples here, but really a lot of paint range has a focus, and I would say this paint range, its focus would be figures, which is probably why they're so good at brush painting, because they are sort of focusing on that. But you know, there's lots of colors out there for pretty much anything and everything, which is what I do sort of like about it. Nice good color matches. The other thing is if we sort of sum this up, really what we have here is a paint range that does everything well, right? Really does them very, very good. I do find when it comes to the paint ranges that I've used over the years, is when it comes to airbrushing, they tend to be thinner and they tend to be good for one thing, and that is spraying through the airbrush. So the biggest selling point for this paint range is the fact that you can airbrush and still airbrush well and do all that kind of stuff, but at the same time you can airbrush, and that's the biggest selling point, which I really like about this paint range, is to be able to go off and brush paint, which really does sort of make it a big difference, and really sort of makes it a sort of appealing paint range. Now, they aren't over expensive, they're not cheap, they're around about a standard price as well. That comes into a nice 17mm bottle, but because they're thick as well, for all you airbrushes out there, you're using less paint. You know, as I say, I'll thin them down about 60 to 40% paint, which basically means it goes a little bit further as well because they're so thick. So they are good in that sense, and they've got loads of other stuff as well. I mean, I do have, you know, we have our mattes, our glosses, glazes. I think they've got retarders. They've done a nice sort of new primer for this range as well, so there's all sorts going on. Oh, and don't forget, they even do inks as well, which is rather cool. Again, you know, which is why I kind of think they're a bit sort of more focused on the miniatures, because they've got inks for doing miniatures, which is what you kind of want when you do miniatures. So really a big general thumbs up there. And as I say, I think the biggest selling point is that you can brush paint, which is really sort of exciting, because in the past I would always sort of do my brush painting with this manufacturer and that manufacturer, but when it would come to using a brush, I'd be using Citadel. But it's nice to see that you've got a manufacturer that is more focused on the, shall we say, the scale modeler, but having a nice figure painting paint range, which you can double up as airbrushing as well. So it could probably save you a little bit of money down the line. Now, this was sent to me as a sample, and in all honesty, I would still go out and buy them anyway. So thanks for AK for sending them me, but I would still go out and buy it anyway. But hopefully you've enjoyed that. Hopefully you've had a good look at the paint range, and hopefully you're going to enjoy using them as much as I've enjoyed using them. So as always, until next time, my name's Bob Waldron, this is Genesis Models, and I hope you've enjoyed.